Thank you.
Now, one of the main themes at this moment is, of course, the reform of the fiscal rules, while at the same time the need to step up sustainable investment. How do you think that Eurozone countries can actually bridge those two things together?
Well, look, it's been a debate that's been in the making for quite some time, and it's a very important debate because Europe is politically so committed to actually achieve its climate goals. And for that, you need quite a bit of public investment. You need a lot of private investment, but you need some public investment. And public investment into climate infrastructure is not going to be funded by cutting current expenditures. So you need some exemptions on the deficits to allow for this public investment to be funded via debt, essentially. Now, the worry is, of course, that by the frugal countries or by the more northern countries is that basically everything will be declared green, right? And there will be lots of greenwashing, and all of a sudden, deficits will explode instead of fiscal rectitude setting in. And so I think it's that tension that is really going to be debated today as two new finance ministers actually make their debut here.
So how do you think this will play out over the next few months? And do you think there will be some sort of breakthrough on how to reform the fiscal rules this year?
Well, I really think we will know better tonight once we hear what the two finance ministers that are new, especially the German and the Dutch one, are really saying. They really have an important say here. My personal view is it would be a mistake to, in general, relax the fiscal rules, which is a tendency that some countries have, because now interest rates are going up, debt levels have increased quite a bit. So at some stage, no matter what kind of fiscal rules, you have to start the fiscal consolidation. So that's really important, to start the fiscal consolidation at some stage. Now then, get some reform done, and the one reform I think that is really necessary is the one on climate finance. Get that funded with deficits so that Europe can achieve its climate goals and make a contribution to global climate change.
So what do you think will be the role from the new German finance minister in specific about these discussions? Do you think he will be okay with saying, yes, let's be a bit more flexible with the way that we count deficit and public debt to support sustainable investments?
Yeah, I think the German finance minister, of course, in principle doesn't like the word flexibility, right? So what I think he might accept is a very targeted flexibility on green investments. And the reason why he might have to accept it is that also domestically he has been having exactly the same debate. Germany is now committed to use debt for climate investments and has actually just passed a supplementary budget for this year in which there's some funding, some deficit, which is basically earmarked for climate investments in the next years. So Germany has already gone down a bit that road. And so now telling everybody else that they cannot do that is also going to be difficult. So I think a very small targeted exemption with very clear control to prevent greenwashing, I think that's the way to go.
We've also heard recently from Isabel Schnabel from the ECB essentially highlighting that the transition to carbon neutrality could push inflation even higher. Do you think the Eurozone governments have actually grasped that, and consumers as well? Do you think that notion is out there?
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of complacency about what the climate transition actually means. And the European Commission here behind us has actually sort of promised that this will be just a piece of cake and, a green growth strategy even. And, that's not so clear. I think there will be lots of negative supply shocks in the next years because it's going to be costly, this transition. It's not going to happen for free. And that's why also it's very dangerous to open up the fiscal spending barrel too general because, growth is not guaranteed. And if there's no growth, debt sustainability is more of an issue.
So based on what you just said, is it realistic to expect that inflation will somehow fade out throughout this year?
Well, let's say I'm less optimistic than the European Central Bank on the inflation outlook. I mean, it's very difficult to substantiate, but many of the factors might last longer than we think. The global supply chain disruptions coming from COVID in Asia. I mean, these are all things that might lead to longer inflation.